Hey, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry for the slight delay. We are going to be learning tonight Maseches Chullin Daf Lamed Ches right on schedule. We're two lines from the bottom of Lamed Zayin and the Beis, and we've been discussing this sugya about an animal that's a misukenes, an animal that's not quite a treifa. I spoke it out yesterday toward the end of the daf on Shabbos that perhaps we're talking about an animal that can't stand up on its own. And then we saw both from Pumbedisa and from Surah that it was even if their teeth and jaw were strong enough to chew on even on a beam, even though they were a very strong animal, but if you can't stand up, then you're considered a misukenes. Fine. So says the Gemara, two lines from the bottom, Ashkechin hu Shmuel, tell me they derab. Shmuel, Shmuel and Rab they overlapped.
Something inside is not right, that it's on the verge of death.
It's close to death, but it's not treifa level.
Right.
A treifa could be alive, right?
I'm saying
an animal that's a treifa, that's alive.
Yeah, 12 months.
The treifa can have 12 months live. If you knew an animal was a treifa,
nothing more than a broken leg that could heal.
we're not even talking on that level. We're talking about an animal.
I'm asking on this level, but in other words, if it's a matter of not being able to get up, if it's something internal, you can't get up for something really wrong. If something you can't get up because it's a broken leg.
That's a good question. That's a very fair question. The Gemara is not mechalik. I don't know.
I don't think that's a thing. It's about moon for caution.
Right.
You don't think it would cause for it to be a misukenes, meaning it's injured.
Oh, then why use that as the measures? In other words,
Yeah, but everyone seems to. It seemed to be across the boards yesterday at the end of the sugya. But yeah, very fair question. I didn't spend time on this yesterday, but I wonder if it. I don't see anything here in Rashi to speak about the fact that it's standing or not standing. But that was their measure. I agree. My instinct is like yours that a broken leg is different. Meaning misukenes is like I'm not the animals. The phase before the phase of dying. Correct. Animals heal from that all the time. So Ashkechin Shmuel Talmid, I didn't even start yet, Stan. You're cheppering me here. Ashkechin Shmuel Talmidei de Rav. So Shmuel was a little bit younger. Remember Rav, Talmid of Rebbe, the Dora Ma'avar, he was a little bit older. So Shmuel found the Talmidim of Rav. So he is instantly intrigued. I need to learn something about Rav. Amar Lahu, Shmuel says to the Talmidim, My Amar Rav Misukenes. When you guys were in shiur with Rav, I'm clamoring to hear, what did he say about Misukenes? Amruleh, the Talmidim of Rav, said back to Shmuel, Hachi Amar Rav, this is what he said. Goa, if an animal makes an animal sound, a groan, a grunt of some kind, or vihitila rei, or if in the process of the shlita it defecates, or vikiskisa be'ozna, if its ear twitches, hareza pirchus, this is a sufficient amount of pirchus to allow for the animal to be considered not a misukenes. Remember that we said this in the Mishnah on Lamed Vav Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph that a misukenes is only for an animal that has a starting point that's bad. Other animals don't need a parameter to be matir, but when we have a misukenes, we need to be matir. So Rav, this is what the Talmidim of Rav were telling Shmuel. Rav held that if the animal during Shechita was goa, it was able to make this guttural sound, or if it defecated or the ear twitched, hareze pirchus, and then it's no longer a misukenes. Omar lehu, Shmuel says back to the Talmidim of Rav, isricha le'aba la'azuze oni, speaking in Aramaic, does Abba a term of endearment? That's what Rashi says, la'aba, le'rav havakar le'shmuel, hachi, mishum kavod. Shmuel referred to Rav as Abba. So we don't really use this anymore as a term of kavod. Hagon, Harav, Hagon. We have different terminologies today, but that's how we call Rav. So he says he needs him to move his ear. I don't understand that, says Shmuel. Three lines down. Shani Omer Kol she'enu dvarim shehamisa ose. The only thing that I need to be matir the misukenes is something that death doesn't do. So let's see what that means. My ninhu dvarim sheha misa ose. First, we need to do what misa is ose, and then what misa is not ose. So Amar Rav Anan ledidi mifreshali minei demar Shmuel. So Rav Anan says, I heard from Shmuel with my own two ears. Hayasayada kfufa ufashatata. Let's say the animal's leg was bent right before the shechita took place. After the shechita, he shechs, the animal reacts and straightens out its leg. Says the Gemara, That's davar shehamisa ose. That's normal stuff. That's regular death stuff, and doesn't remove it from the category of misukenes. Then the Gemara says, but if it was pshuta, if the leg wasn't bent and unbent, it was already straight, the leg, and then ukifafa, and then it closed, it folded, the leg bent by the knee, that's dvarim she'ein hamisa osa, and therefore that would be a sign that it's not a misukenes anymore. If what's happening is normal death throes, not considered to be a matir for a misukenes, it needs to be unique enough that regular death doesn't do it. It has to be that the animal was really alive enough, and therefore that siman is now happening. So it says the Gemara, if the front leg was bent and straightened, the animal will not be kosher. That's a misukenes. However, if the arm was straight and then bent, that is going to be considered, that's dvarim she'eina misa osa, and therefore that animal will not be a misukenes, and it's mutter to eat. Says the Gemara, thank you, Shmuel, but no chiddush over here. My komash malon, we already know this. Tanina. Well, what did it say in our Mishnah? Behema daka shepashta yada v'lo hichazira psula. If the behema daka had its front leg extended, shepashta yada v'lo hichazira, and it didn't come back in psula. She'ein ela hutzas nefesh. That's regular death stuff. What does that imply? Hichazira kshera, which is exactly what Shmuel said. Shmuel said that if it was straight and then it was bent, so then it's no longer a misukenes. That's not regular misa stuff. That's only that's already the sign that the misukenes was the real deal. That it was not a misukenes. That it was a real healthy animal. So why did we need Shmuel? Sounds like a diuk from our Mishnah would have been sufficient. So says the Gemara as follows: Imimas nisen. If we only had our Mishnah and not the sheet of Shmuel that we just saw, have amina dafka de chayfa upashta v'hadar kaifa. La. I might have thought that when would we be matir the misukenes? If it was bent and then it straightened and then it bent. Aval, if it started pshuta and then bent only without having gone bent, straight bent, I would have thought that it was not considered to uproot misukenes, kamash malan, that it does uproot misukenes. So basically, the havamina was that if, let's just follow along here, it says, I'll just use my arm as the example. I might have thought, says the Gemara, that the only time that bringing the arm back in is if it starts out bent and then it's kfufa, pshuta, kfufa. But if it was only starting out this way and then bent in, I would have said lo, kamash malan. It's not true. It's not true. So says the Gemara. That's why we needed Shmuel. Meisvei, the Gemara says on Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, a quarter of the way down. Rav Yossi Omer, I'm going to push against Rav, says the Gemara. Haya Reb Meir Omer. Reb Meir used to say, Goa, if the animal made some guttural sound, b'shas shchita, ein ze pirchus. Completely against Rav, top word of the page, Goa, harei ze pirchus. So Rav and Reb Meir argue. Reb Elazar, Reb Yossi Omer mishmo afilu hitila re'e v'kiskisa bezanva, ein ze pirchus. If it defecated, it would be considered to not be pirchus, and if it moved its zanav, its tail, it would not be considered to be pirchus. So this is a little different than Rav. Which part of the body did Rav say had to move? The ears. So here in this Mishnah with Rav Meir and Rav Elazar, nobody talks about ears over here. We have Goa, which he argues against Ravan, and we have Hitila Re'e, which he argues against Ravan. So the Gemara calls that a double question. Kasha Goa Agoa. We have Rav Shita of Goa, which is the top line of Maseches Amud Aleph, where he says that if the animal right upon shchita makes some kind of sound, which parenthetically is impressive because you severed below, that's the din, you severed below the vocal cords. Thank you. You severed below. It's very, I don't know how you make a sound. I don't know exactly. Maybe you cut the veshet first. I don't know exactly how it works. But Rav said that Goa was a sign of pirchus. Rav Meir says it's not. And also kasha re'e are'e, because Rav said on the top line that re'e was considered a sign of pirchus. But over here, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi in the Brisa, third of the way down, says ein ze pirchus. So says the Gemara, no, none of these are questions. Goa, agoa, lo kasha. The sounds that an animal makes by shchita are not a kasha, not a sira between Rav and Rav Meir, because ha de avi kala, one is a thicker, heavier voice. That's Rav. Rav would say that if you had a thicker, heavier voice, then it would be considered to take it out of the category of mesukenes. And according to Rav Meir, that's the ami kala. Rashi, the ami kala, keha, mitargeminan amya. Keha, light. Light means amya. It's not a Hebrew word. It's an Aramaic word, and it means lighter. It means softer, more gentle in this context. I don't recall seeing this word before, but it's a bit mechudash, but to me, just because I'm sure we may have seen it, I just don't remember it. But that's what the Gemara says, that on the pasuk of keha in regards to a nega, that that Onkelos there says amya. So fine. Anyways, the Gemara says that's why agoa is not a stira. Rav, when he says that goa takes you into the category of pirchus and out of the category of mesukenes, is with a loud voice. And according to Rav Meir, when a voice does not take you into pirchus and out of the category of mesukenes, that is the ami kala, where the voice is light. And also re'e nami lo kasha. It's also not a stira in regards to Rav Shita, where if an animal defecates, it is considered a sign that it's not an animal, which is a mesukenes. Whereas Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yossi in the Brisa, third of the way down, held that it was problematic. He says lo kasha, kan bisho seses. One is talking about where, yes, the animal does defecate, but very slowly. It's not like a significant movement, and kan b'masrezes, where it is more significant. So that's what the Gemara says over here as to why there's a distinction in. So Rashi shoseses is very little besamuch, where the fecal matter is close to the body. It's not pirchus because it's a dribble as opposed to a significant push. So that's what Rashi says bisamach, that when he defecates, it lands close to the body. And Rashi then says masrezes limirachok. This is a sign of life, right? So that's the distinction. A little bit the phraseology is, not the wording, but the order is different, because in the first case, Rav was first and Rav Meir was second, and here it flipped. But the lenient shita was shoseses, okay, fine, but that's not a big deal. Good. So far, so good. So as of right now, Rav, we understand Rav. We also seem to understand Shmuel. Good. Amar Rav Chizda, just about halfway down on Lamed Chesem at Aleph, the Gemara says as follows: Pirchus sha'amru b'sof shchita. When we talk about pirchus, at what point in the shchita are we measuring and testing the mesukenes? Let's remember, when we have an animal that's mesukenes, that's not able to stand, we have to see something that shows that it's really alive beyond the normal death throes. We need a proof that it's alive. When in the shechita process are we assessing? Let's look at our measuring tools. Goa, it has to make this sound. It has to be hitila rei, has to go to the bathroom. Kiskasa be'ozen, according to Rav. Shmuel's a little bit different. He doesn't have exactly the same parameters. So when are we measuring? So here we're going to see three answers. Amar Rav Chizda, pirchus sha'amru b'sof shchita. We're looking toward the end of the shchita process, not right by the cut, but later on in the process. How do we know what time frame we're talking about? My b'sof shchita, be'emsa shchita. It's a difficult language, but what does the end of shchita mean? What does that mean? So we have to pick this apart a little bit. La'afuke tchila shchita dula. We're not talking about the first second. During the first, again, I'm putting terms that don't apply. Seconds are not the right terminology. But during the first moments when the shechita takes place, anything that happens there is regular death throes. So we're not talking about that phase. To take an animal out of mesukenes, we can't be looking at the earlier phase of shechita, but the middle phase of shechita. That's when we need to see these reactions of the animal that say, no, this animal isn't a mesukenes, it's really healthy. What are those dugmas? As we saw on the top of the page, goa, hitila rei, and kiskasa be'ozla. Amar Rav Chizda minu aminala. How do I know that we should not be looking at the early part of shchita to measure whether or not the animal is a mesukenes? Ditnan, we have a mishnah. Behema daka shepashta yada v'lo ichzira. If we have an animal, we have a small animal, shepashta yada, the front leg extended, the knee is locked, v'lo hichzira, and the animal stayed that way, it didn't bend back. That's psula. Why? Because that's early phase of shchita. It's an instantaneous, I'm making this up, I assume it's true, it's an automatic reaction, and it's normal, and therefore the animal's psula. Emas. When is it that we see this action and the animal is psula? Ilema bisof shchita. If you want to say we're talking about all the way at the end later on, again, I don't know what this means. What? Yeah, yeah. No. We're pushing against that. We're saying it's right. No. This Besof Shchita means after the middle.
Oh.
Yeah. So says the Gemara. You'll see in a second how. Talk to the Shochet. Well, it could be. It could be, first of all, on a larger animal that it takes longer. That also our knives are going to be 20 times sharper than their knives. Like what we have is hard. You don't think so? From
My knives would be the same. In other words, they weren't slicing 5 times, right? So.
Yeah.
By Behemagasa?
What?
By Behemagasa, they weren't? Have you done a gasa?
No.
Have you done a daka or just birds? Not just, so minimize it. So I would never want to do that. I mean, that is,
Maybe, right?
it's molech maybe is the rule, but the question is how many do you need? Like, let's say on a cow, you have leather skin. It's got to be more than 2 motions. Unless the blade is very, very long. When I cut challah, I have the goal of 1 molech and 1 maybe. It doesn't always work, though. And I'm very OCD. Every slice has to be the same. It's not good. I get made fun of. Rivka, we had company. They're like, this is taking forever. Just give us challah already. Yeah. No. The second I gave it her, she's like, wah! I know, it's really long. My mistake, could have left my house already, but I don't know.
More, but.
So let's just see what the Gemara says. Amos. Yeah.
Like the end, that's like after. It has to be
After what?
after like you're done. That's the end. Like
Give me details.
meaning the point is you want the purpose to be happening even after the knife is removed, and that shows.
So we're talking about a 3-second span, let's call it.
Yeah.
From the second the knife starts, and then the knife touches, you start your motion. Start the clock. 1, 2, 3, shchita, good, and then so that's tchila. Where's emta? So let's detail. The Gemara is going to say right now, emas. When is it that we say, like the Mishnah, that the behema that is a daka that doesn't when it locks its front legs, it doesn't bring it back to bent position, that it's puzzle. Kol hechi techi b'tezel. You're going to wait that long to measure if this animal's a misukenes? Elala be'emsa shchita. We're talking about dakus. We're talking about very, very small amounts of time. Amarle Rava, I completely disagree with you, Rav Chizda. Besof shchita. She'ani omer kol she'ena osekein besof shchita biyadua shenishmasa netula heimana kodem lechein. If it doesn't happen by the end of the shchita, then I know that the neshama of the animal was gone earlier and the animal was really a misukenes. So slight differences in timing, but big differences in outlook, right? The way that Rav is looking at it is kind of more from, did it happen at any point? Between now and the time, I don't know, whatever that later point is. He's just waiting. Who cares when it happens? Rav says it doesn't matter. Let it happen later. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Pirchus Sha'amru B'tchila Shchita. He argues it's the first moment. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Minu Aminallah, that we're talking about measuring the knee-jerk reactions of the animal, literally and figuratively, that the animal would be measured at tchila shchita as to whether or not it's a misukenes. Titnan. Amar Reb Shimon, Hashochet balayla, case we saw on Shabbos, person who does a shchita at night, ulamachar matzak salam aleim dam, and the next morning you see that the walls of the Beis HaShchita are filled with blood, halacha is kshera, because obviously shezinka, because there was clearly a major flow of blood. Uchmidas Rebbe Lazar. We're clearly talking about the walls of the Beis HaShchita. Now, if you want to say that we're willing to look at that first moment, no problem. But if you say that we're only measuring at sof shchita, that's a problem. Because remember, you shechted at night. You have no idea how much blood there was in the first second or in the 5th second. You don't know. And therefore, you don't know if it was in the beginning or the end. And therefore, we have to assume that it was the beginning, right when you cut. So therefore, it must be that we assume that it's tchila shchita. Again, a couple of different shitas. We have middle, end, and beginning. Not in that order, but we have middle, end, and beginning. We'll see another shita repeating one of our shitas at the bottom of the page. Hi, Vidilma Shiny Zinuk to Adif. Maybe you can't bring a proof from Zinuk because Zinuk is like the best form of showing that this animal was a viable animal, that it had a gush of blood during the shechita. So let's say you did the shechita now, you wake up in the morning, the neck of the animal's pashed pasted over in blood, covered. So I don't care if it's tchila, emtza, or sof. I know this animal had good blood pressure when it died. Good to go for me. Good to go. So maybe there's a uniqueness in zinuk which makes it different than other litmus tests of whether or not the animal is a misukenes. Says the Gemara, miyadif. Do we always assume that zinka, that the flow of blood is adif? I wouldn't say that, says the Gemara. Why not? Because 10 lines from the bottom, v'otnan. Rebbe Lazar Omer, daya im zinka. It's enough, listen to the language, even if only zinka, that's enough to get it out of the category of misukenes. What does that sound like? That zinka is the last option. Like, it's not ideal. But daya, that if you saw zinka, so don't tell me that zinka is a special form of measuring that an animal's not a misukenes. It's only daya. Okay, fine, I'll be matir with the zinka. No problem. But it's obviously not better than the other ones. Says the Gemara. Well, you're right in one way. It is kal mi de Rabban Gamliel. It is less than how Rabban Gamliel viewed zinka, going back to our Mishnah from Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. But the adif mi de Rabbanan, it's actually in the middle. So if you look back in the Mishnah, what did Rab Shimon ben Gamliel say? Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, Asha tefarkes biyadu beregel. So it's kal from that, meaning yad and regel is the best measure, and then the second best measure is going to be zinka, but it's adif midrabanan. The rabbi said, o yad, o regel, o tekaskes bizanva. So it's in the middle. It's in the middle of those two sets, says the Gemara. Omar Avina, Omar li, Sama bar chilkoi, Akshi ba avua debar abuvram. Very interesting name. And interesting, the father, listen to the language, the father of the son of Abuvram. It's Abuvram. Who's the father of my son? Me. So the Gemara says, Avua de bar Uvram. That's what Rashi says at the bottom. So it says, Abuvram, Shem Ha'ish, Avua bar Uvram, Zeu Avuvram atzmo. Umakirin hayu es haben velo es ha'ab. His son was more famous than he was. Vayukorin asal Shem beno she'asa es beno similo. By the way, the Gemara never tells us what his son's name is. I don't know. Does anybody know his name? I have no idea who he is. I don't know. I've never heard of this. But Rashi doesn't even tell you, which I thought was very interesting. Let's see if the note on the side says it, because I didn't look this up earlier. Nope, doesn't say. He must have been famous back in the day, not famous to us. Anyways, what does Abuvram say? The Amrila Achva de Barvam. Some say it was the brother of Abuvram. Umi de Rabbanan mi adif. Even according to the Rabbanan who hold either or by yad or regel or tail, that the tail could move. Even according to them, is zinka stronger? Not so sure. V'hatnan. We have a Mishnah. V'chachamim omrim ad shetefarches o biyad o biregel. Who were the Chachamim arguing on? Join me back on the top of Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. We have a bunch of shitas in our Mishnah. Rashbag said, Tefarches biyad uveregel. Rebbe Lozer said, Zinka. Reb Shimon said, if you shecht at night, as long as there's blood, you're good to go, like Rebbe Lozer. The Chachamim said, Ashet Tefarches o biyad o biregel. Who are they arguing on? Who are the Chachamim arguing on? Back to where we were. We're on the bottom of Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. 4 lines from the bottom, 5 lines from the bottom. Rabbanan Ohaya. When the Chachamim said Ashet Tefarches o biyad o biregel, who are they talking about? Ilem ad Rabban Gamliel. If you want to say they're arguing on Rabban Gamliel, who says you need both yad and regel, and the Chachamim say, no, I need either or, the operator of O, I need either or. No, then it should have said, Kevan Shepirchasa, once we see Pirchas, you would have been fine with either one. That's what it should have said, Midboile, but it doesn't say that. Ella, it must be that the Rabbanan who say either or was Pshita ad Rebbe Lazar. What did Rebbe Lazar hold? Zinka. The adif, if Zinka was stronger, my ad. why then did the Chachamim say, no, ad shetifarches, that's flipped order again, ad, up until this point, which Zinka is not stronger. So therefore, that is how the Gemara rejects this understanding of this whole number 2 that we're talking about Tchila Shchita, or I should say really that Zinuk is Adif. Zinuk is not necessarily Adif. It could be that Zinuk is the least of the options. Answer number 4, which is a repetition because we already saw Rava earlier. Rava Amar Pirchus Sha'amru B'Sof Shchita. When we talk about Pirchus, such that we're trying to remove the status of Misukenes, when is that? That's only B'Sof Shchita, like Rava said earlier. Amar Rava Mina Aminallah. How do I know that this is true? Because the Tanya, we have a very, very well-known pasuk, and a Balkore in the room who will know this by heart. Shor o chesev o eiz ki yivaled v'hayashiv asimim tachasimo umiyom hashemini v'hala yiratzeh lekorban ishel Hashem. Let's parse the pasuk. The Tanya, shor o chesev, when we talk about these animals, to enable them to be viable for a korban, prat lekilayim. We don't mate animals in the wrong way. O eiz, prat lenidme. A nidme is an animal that does not look like the same class of its parents. It's if the parents were sheeps and the animal looks like a goat, puzzle. It's got to look like the same. And these are not normal things, but that would be a preclusion for korbanos. Ki yivaled, it has to be born like a leda, prat liyotze dofen. If the animal was, and this was a death sentence for the birthing mother, they didn't do surgery on animals. They killed the mother, right? And the animal was taken to be a C-section, preclusion. Shivas yomim prat lemechusar zman Rashi zayin yomim prat lemechusar zman shelo higia lezayin yomim ve'afilu imo kayemes. If the animal is less than 7 days old, that's also not allowed. Tachas imo. What does that mean? That the mother has to still be alive, prat yasom. The mother can't have died. Hi yasom, says the Gemara, Hechi dami lamed chesam and beis, 4 lines down. I lema diilid te imei v'hodar meisa. If you want to say that the mother gave birth and then subsequently died, so does the mother live forever? Like that's what yasom meant in the drasha? La'olam tichi v'tezel? That can't be what yasom meant. Yeah, the mother of the animal is going to die at some point or be shechted. Fine. Ella, it must be the meisar v'hadar yilidte. Maybe when we say yisoma is that she died and then they took the animal out of her. Right? That could be. But then ki yivaled nafka. That's the same thing as the C-section case. A C-section of a cow means 2 dead animals. Well, 1 live animal, I should say, and the dead mother. So it's the same thing. So that can't be what yasom means. So it says the Gemara Pshita zepirish l'misav zepirish l'chaim. Right at the time when the mother was giving birth, the baby was born and the mother died. That's called a yasom. Now, if you want to say that we need life at the end of Leda, now I understand why we needed the case of yasom to be precluded. I get it. If you need the mother to be born when the baby is born, I understand. That's fine. And if the animal is alive at that point, it's not a yasom. If the mother dies at that point, then the animal is a yasom. I get it. It must be, says the Gemara, that Rava's right. I should say, Rava says, here's my reason, which is that when we talk about the yasom, in order to preclude it, has to be that the mother was talking about the end of the Leda. The beginning of the Leda? It doesn't make sense. The beginning of the Leda, if the animal dies, that's ki yivaled. The only way to understand yasom, the case of yasom that precludes an animal from shchita, is to say that when the animal, the child is actually born, at that moment we look at the mother and say, what's her status, alive or dead? That's a yasom. If she dies at that moment, you're right, precluded. Otherwise, now this is a perfect raya, says Rava, to show us that we follow sof Leda. Amar Rava, hilchasa, ki hamas nisa. The halacha is, I skipped a word here. Like I just said, it must be that we look at the end of the Leda in order to assess the status of the mother. Amar Rava Hilchasa ki hamas nisa. The halacha is like the following Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, 10, 12 lines down. Behema daka shepashta yadav lechzira psula, like we've seen. With a small animal, sheep, goat, whatever the case may be, calf, if it extends its front leg and doesn't rebend it when it's being shechted, the halacha is that it's pasul as a misukenes. That's only true with the front leg. Aval beregel, when it comes to the back leg, bein pashta v'lo kfafa, whether or not it was straight and not bent, bein kfafa v'lo pashta, or if it was bent and not straight, the halacha is ksher b'medvar mamurim bidaka. Aval begasa, the halachos are different. When it comes to a gasa, we're talking about a cow now, or a bull, bein biyad, bein beregel, front legs, back legs, bein pashta v'lo kfafa, bein kfafa v'lo pashta ksher. There we don't make any distinctions. We just assume that any action that the animal takes as a gasa is enough to remove it from the category of mesukenes. The oaf, which we haven't been speaking about at all, and this is Rabbi Yaakov's territory over here. If you shecht a bird, afilu lo rifreif elagapo, even if the wings simply fluttered, the low kiss case, and they didn't even like really shake. They just a little twitch, right? Again, I don't know if I'm using the right words, but it's not a full flutter. It's just a small amount of movement. I'm sorry. Velo kiss case elas in avo, and it only. Let me read the whole sentence. Afilu lo rifreif elagapo velo kiss case elazanvo. Even if there was a tiny little flutter of the wings and no moving of the tail, hareze pirchos. Says the Gemara. Rava, what are you teaching me? My kamashmalan kulu tananhi. We learned everything you just said. Why did you just teach me another halacha about this is the halacha? We know this already. That is just regular death. If an animal extends its leg and doesn't bring it back, that's regular death. That doesn't remove you from a sukenes. Yad in regelo. Daka in gasa. We have everything already. Daka lo. We have all this already. Says the Gemara, Rava was being mechadesh, something that we didn't really talk about up until now, which is the bird. That was not included. So that, again, if we had to paskin, it seems like this Mishnah is that Rava is a version of Rava is correct, and we use all of these measures of daka in regards to distinctions of front legs versus back legs, bent versus unbent, unbent versus bent, but the rules for a gasa are different. Good. Let's learn a little bit more. Says the Gemara with a new Mishnah, Lamed Chesam at base halfway down. If I do the shchita, I do regular shchita, but I'm giving it to you, and you're an oved kochavim. Halacha is that it's ksheira. Rabbi Lazar posel. Rabbi Lazar, afidu shachta leechol leoved kochavim mechatzer kaved shela. Even if when you the yid are shechting, all you plan to do is just give the chatzer kaved, which is the diaphragm of the animal. That's all you're going to give to the oved kochavim. He extends his, because he was the one who said Rabbi Lazar says posel in general. Right? If you were planning on giving the whole animal, it's going to be puzzle, says Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar adds, even if you're only giving the diaphragm of the animal, it's also usher. And this is a key to our sugya. Shestam machsheves oved kochavim la'avodas kochavim. What is the mindset of an akum? Is the mindset of an akum that any and every shchita is avodah zara? We're not like that. We don't have everything kudge, we have chullin. Says the Gemara, not like that by a guy. The stam machshava by an akum is la avodas kochavim. Amar Reb Yossi kal v'chomer advarim. I'll give you a beautiful kal v'chomer. Says the Gemara, uma b'makom shamachshava poseles b'mekudashin. When we're dealing with korbanos, we know that we have machshavas pigul that could ruin it. Ein hakol holech ela achar ha'oved. And that really only has to do with me, the person who's doing the work. Right? We don't follow the other guy. I'm in charge. My machshavos are going to govern. Makom she'ein machshava poseles bechulin. If I'm just cutting a chulin animal, but I did it for a goy. Eino din shelo yehei hakol holech achar hashochet. Why are we following the goy? I'm cutting a corned beef for myself. Why? Okay, so he'll take the diaphragm. Why are we have a kal v'chomer working in our favor? If by kudshim, when we talk about a machshavas pigul, there we only care about the shochet and not the other guy. Why by chulin do we care about the other guy? Even less. It's a kal v'chomer. It's more kal. Good. So says the Gemara. We're just going to get Emir Hashem to 3 lines. See where we get to. Says the Gemara. Hani tanoe. The first 2 tanoim of our Mishnah. Islahu de Rabbi Eliezer b'Reb Yossi. According to the Shita of the Tanakama and Rabbi Lazar. They hold like Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi Tanya. What does the Brisa say? A Brisa from Zvachim. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yossi. Shamati shahabailim mefaglin. I know, he says, that bailim, that owners can be mefagil. The owners can have a machshavas pigul. Says the Gemara, Mihu Tanakama Savar I Shamine Dechashiv in Ilolo. If I hear, in regards to the Bailim Mefaglin, that's only if I hear that they had a machshavas pigul. Ilolo Stam machshavas obe kochavim lavodas kochavim lo amrina. We have to hear from this is what they argue about. They don't agree with the shita we saw in our Mishnah that every single guy always is thinking about avodas kochavim. It's not true. Jews don't cut Chullin for the sake of I mean, we do for Shabbos, but I'm saying, but it's not avoda. It's not avoda zara by a guy. It's not avodas Hashem by a yid. It's shchita for Chullin. So it says the Gemara that according to the Tanakama, samach shavas ovid kochavim lavodas kochavim lo amrina. That's why in our Mishnah the Tanakama holds that it's kosher, because without him articulate, if he says nothing, what's our assumption? If he says nothing, okay, stam goy. So I'm allowed to shecht for him, no problem. It doesn't ruin my korban. But for Rebbe Lazar Savar, that afal gav de lo shamine dechashiv, even if I don't hear something from him, stam machshavas avodas kochavim, oved kochavim lavodas kochavim amrinon. The Asa Rabbi Yossi lemeimar. This was the last shita that we saw. What does Rabbi Yossi come to teach us? That afal gav de shamine dechashiv. I don't care. I don't care if I heard the avodas kochavim, oved kochavim talking about it. It doesn't matter. Ze mechashev, the ze oved, lo amrinon. So we have three shitas. Shita number one is that stam oved kochavim lavodas kochavim. That means that even if he says nothing, stam, we assume that it's l'shem avodas kochavim. Then we have that's going to be Rebbe Lazar in the Mishnah. Then we have our Tanakama. Stam oved kochavim lavodas kochavim lo amrinon. If it's stam, we don't say anything. The 13th is the most extreme. Say whatever you want. I really don't care. I'm doing the shchita. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam ala shchita. Done. Why did you take the die from? Who cares? Ze mechashev, the ze oved lo amrinon. Apples and oranges. We are not the same. I'm doing my work in a vacuum. Yes, you'll get some of it. Okay, that's right. You'll get some of it, but I don't care. Three-way machlokes tanan. Anika da amre. Really, some say that the machlokes is a little different. It's b'deshamine dechashiv pligi, where we know he said something. Tanakama savar ki amrina ze mechashev ze oved hani milibifnei maval b'chutz lo. Yes, we know he wants to do it for avodas kochavim. The Gemara takes this a whole step further. Now this isn't about what stam is. We know he wants it for avodas kochavim. Now what? Tanakama says, when do we say ze mechashev ze oved? Only bifnim in the Beis Hamikdash. Aval b'chutz, we don't say that, and therefore by Chullin, we do have a problem, but ki amrinon ze mechashev ze oved hani mili bifnim. Aval b'chutz, we don't say it outside. Chutz mipnim lo yalfinan, because we don't learn inside from outside. No relation between the two. The also Rabbi Eliezer lemeimar that yalfinan chutz mipnim. We do learn one from the other. The also Rabbi Yossi lemeimar afilu bifnim nami ze mechashev v'ze oved lo amrinon. So we could create a gorgeous chart here of the three-way machlokes tanoim in two different cases. The first machlokes is about stam. The second machlokes is about even if we know that he had kavana, and then all the shitas will fit in those boxes perfectly. We'll stop right here at the word itmar on the top of Lamed Tesem. Aleph. We'll pick up Emir Hashem tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.